Please give a startup grind welcome to Jeff Berding. Thank you for being here, Jeff.
Good to be here, Todd.
This is awesome. So before we get into we usually talk about the past and kind of some of the challenges, and then talk about some of the features, kind of the format that we do. But before we get into that, we always like to know a little bit more about our guest, other than that you have an awesome sock game here.
Thank you.
See with the polka dots. I appreciate. I got a little bit going on with these skull crossbones, but. Love to hear about your family. Tell us about your family. You probably don't get asked that much, but
I grew up here in Cincinnati, in Westwood. So I'm very familiar with your building, only have driven by it thousands of times. I'm from a large Catholic family in Westwood, one of 10 kids. When I was growing up, both my parents played sports. My dad played baseball against Pete Rose. I met Pete Rose a few years ago, and he's like, "Berding, you Jerry Berding's kid?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So my parents played softball. My mom played in a co-ed league when I was a little kid. She played shortstop. One time some guy completely took her out at second base and bloodied her. And she bounced back up, and so we didn't have a whole lot of money, but we had sports. Sports was a really big thing in our family. So as a kid I played basketball, I played baseball, I played soccer as a little kid. I was a goalkeeper. Sort of the first generation of soccer players in the 70s. And then when I got to St. X, I played football and ran track. So, when you're from a large family, you have practice. And then when practice is over, literally we had to race home. Like you might have been on your bike, or maybe you were walking, park was right up the street. You'd race home, because if you got home late, literally you didn't have dinner because the other kids ate all the dinner. So you would get a bowl of cereal or maybe some Campbell's soup or something. So sports was a very important part of growing up. I would love to tell you that I was this incredible athlete, but I was the guy on the team. This is going to date me here. You can Google it. I was Spaz from the movie Meatballs. So literally, I was the kid with the bad clothes. I had the bad haircut. I had the glasses with the tape in the middle, But I was the guy that I earned all 5 fouls.
Nice.
I did the dirty work. I hated losing. When I was a kid once, I played third base. This was like at 9, 10 years old, and when the kids would come sliding into third base, when I tag them, I'd come up and punch them with my glove in the face. And my coach says, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Well, because I'm sending a message, don't come to third base. And then if there's a pass ball or a wild pitch, he'll be at second, he'll come to third, but he won't score, and that may be the difference between us winning and losing." Right. And he goes, "Okay, but don't hurt anyone." One day I was playing third base, and I did this to a kid, and the coach behind me, a grown man, says, "If you ever do that again, I'll kill you." And I'm literally thinking "Yeah, right." So seriously, an inning or two later, some kid comes to third base, and I swipe the tag up and pop him in his face. And the next thing I knew, I was face down in the dirt with the coach on top of me. And so he got thrown out of the park, probably suspended for a while. But the kid was out at third base, and literally the next pitch, our pitcher threw a pass ball, and I'm like, see, I told my coach afterwards, okay, I saved us a run there. Awesome. So very competitive. And I was, a lot of coaches really took an interest in me. So, sort of where it comes from is, coaches and teachers. So they saw something in me that I didn't have any knowledge of, that it was even there. And so they were the ones that sort of encouraged me to go to St. X High School, where the Jesuit Men for Others motto became really an important part of my life. And coaches and teachers there really sort of propelled me to want to go to college. Mm-hmm. And I was the first Berding to go to college and graduate from college.
That's great. That's awesome. So tell me about, before we get, because I want to talk a little bit more about the back history, but tell us about now. Tell us about your family now.
So I have 3 teenagers. So my oldest, I picked her up on Friday from Miami University. She just finished her first year. So she's 19. I have a 17-year-old son who's a junior at St. X, soccer player. And then I have a 15-year-old daughter who turns 16 in July. She plays soccer and basketball at Walnut Hills.
Gotcha. Great.
So, and I'm married, Lindsay. We live over in Mount Lookout. Gotcha. So of 10 Berdings, 7 live in Greater Cincinnati. And I'm the only one that lives east of 75. So my other, they live on the west side somewhere.
Great. That's great.
But we live in Mount Lookout, and I make the easy drive. I have siblings who have never been to my house because they can't get over like going to the east side. So it's pretty crazy.
That's funny. That's great. I always like a little bit of human interest on what your family does today. Yeah. So talk about more about that in the back history. So I've talked to and heard from other like professional athletes that sometimes surprisingly say, even like I think I've heard Anthony Munoz, we were just talking about Anthony Munoz too, who talked about his love for baseball. His first love was baseball. So what was your, and we were actually talking about, your one sport. What was your one sport? Was it baseball, or what sport did you really love?
I was probably the best in baseball.
Okay.
Again, my dad and my mom playing softball. So I was a pretty decent third baseman, and I pitched. I threw a no-hitter when I was a kid. I hit 5 guys, but I threw a no-hitter.
Yeah.
But I played soccer. I was a goalkeeper. I left soccer to play football because I got bored as a goalkeeper. If you're on a good team, you don't get any action.
Right.
This is before the rules were reintroduced to allow playing the ball back to the goalkeeper, and the goalkeeper could play with his feet. So I'd go whole games with like no, and so all of a sudden I'd start sneaking forward and play fullback, and all of a sudden the coach would be like, "Berding, get back in the goal."
Those gloves kind of stick out.
So my son Jack, when he was at St. Ursula Villa as a preschooler in P4, we're not even in kindergarten, turns 5 in January, and I talked the coaches into letting Jack play for St. Ursula Villa in spring say soccer. And so my dad comes to the game, and Jack in his very first game scores a goal. And so my dad says to him after the game, "Well, congratulations, Jack. You've now scored more goals than your dad ever did playing soccer."
That's great.
So I liked soccer, but I just was bored with it. So when I went to St. X, I switched over to football. A great story there too. So my mom didn't want me to play football because she thought it was too dangerous. And so when I was in grade school, I had this mantra as a goalkeeper. Like I'll admit, I don't know a whole lot about all the other positions, but I know goalkeeper pretty decently. And I always had this thing: if I'm going to come off my line, you either get the ball or you get the guy, but you can't let them both go past you. And so I came out once and didn't get the ball, but I took the guy out and took a knee in my chin and knocked my 2 teeth out. And the coach comes out and he starts with a towel starting to wipe the blood up, and my dad says, no, let him be all bloody. And so I come home with my mouth all bloody and my 2 teeth, and my dad says, "I told you soccer was dangerous." And all of a sudden she says, "Okay, he can play football."
Gotcha.
Never got my teeth knocked out in football,
point.
so
Gotcha. That's cool. So playing sports at St. X, talk about that journey, from playing high school and college sports to your your first. What was your first jobs? Your first career, early in your career.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that journey?
So I started at St. X, and I could have gone to like Georgetown College, north of Lexington, sort of a small Division III kind of thing. And I knew I was not going to be a professional athlete. So the only school that we could afford that I got into was Miami University. And so Miami was a great opportunity for me. Again, first kid in the family. I worked construction to pay my way through school.
Wow.
Literally dug I dug ditches. I shoveled the walkways. I drove the plow in the winter. So when all my friends were off skiing somewhere, I was doing that. But I learned hard work, and I didn't want to do this the rest of my life. So I did pretty well in school. I was an RA. I'm a big fan of being an RA. You think you have problems in the workplace, and then you have to solve like 2 roommates, and one of them has their other person spend the night over, and they're making it's
like daycare, right?
You get to navigate tough situations as an RA.
Right.
So I started out in college as international studies. I was interested in global hunger, and I literally couldn't master French. Because I took Latin at St. X, and so everyone in French 101 in college has had 2 or 3 years of high school French. And I'm like, I can't deal with this. And so I switched over to Russian, and everyone's in 101 Russian. No one's had it before. So level playing field, I could handle that.
Gotcha.
And so I was Soviet studies. It was right when Gorbachev had come to power with Glasnost and Perestroika. So I was a Soviet studies major, and I was thinking of world peace and the opening of the Soviet Union. And so I thought I was going to be a diplomat and go to the State Department. And then when I was there, I had the opportunity to meet the governor of Ohio, Dick Celeste, and literally hosted him in my room. He spent the night in my dorm room one night when I was an RA, and he got me involved working on his campaign, and then I worked in the Ohio office in DC. And so I thought, well, you can change the world through electing good people. And so my first job out of college, I worked for the Attorney General of Ohio, and then I worked for the Speaker of the House, Vern Reif. Then I was John Glenn's state political director in 1992, his last election. Then I went to spend a year in DC, all in politics. And then in 94, I came back and was the campaign manager for David Mann, who's now our vice mayor, but back then was our member of Congress. And then in 95, I had just moved back to Cincinnati with my soon-to-be wife, who was graduated from Case Western. And they asked me to run the stadium campaign. And as someone who grew up on the Big Red Machine and 2 Super Bowl teams of the Bengals, the thought of, okay, I've moved back to Cincinnati, I'm going to raise my family here, and we're not going to have professional sports. And to me, that just seemed crazy. And because I had political experience and I grew up here, people asked me to run that campaign. So they hired me, and I had just started my MBA at night, so I took a hold on that and did that from November of 95 to March of 96. And we got 62% of the vote. And so it was so successful that Mike Brown, the owner of the Bengals, asked me if I would be willing to come on board and be a senior executive with the Bengals. And that's how I got into professional sports. Gotcha. So everyone else, has like a master's in sports administration. It's interned, all the way up through. And I sort of came at it through the back door, through politics.
Gotcha. So when you were studying politics at the time, what was your vision of success in terms of, the next 5 years or so? Were you diplomat was that?
Well, I thought diplomat. Obviously, if you're electing John Glenn to be your United States Senator, you feel like you're making the community better. I do believe, and it's hard to think in the era that we're in, but back in the 90s, you could still think this, electing good people, whether it be in your community or for your country or your state, is making our world a better place, is making our community a better place, and that's what I wanted to do. I thought at some point I'd probably run for office, and then I ended up running for office because I spent, while I was a full-time executive at the Bengals, they let me run for city council, and I got elected 3 times to Cincinnati City Council. So.
Gotcha. That's great. So, in doing some of my research, I've heard from several people, kind of one of the common denominators was, I heard integrity, that you're a man of integrity, which I appreciate and was happy to hear that. When you're dealing in politics and you're dealing with, sports and the stadiums and things like that, I would imagine that there's some pressure to not be a man of integrity. Can you share any times where there was some pressure to do that, or how you navigated that?
Let me say this. I always took great pride because you could tell I'm competitive from some of the experiences I shared. And so I took great pride and literally would tell people, and I know we're taping this, but I'm going to say it the way I would say it. You can call me an ass, but you can't call me a liar. And so I would tell it how it is, and sometimes I might say it unvarnished, but at least you knew you were getting the truth.
Sure.
And I felt that was always important. So if I gave you my word that I was going to support it, I would support it. And yeah, the hard part is sometimes, people would say, okay, I'll give you an example. There was this union vote that was very tough for me. The AFL-CIO, the unions wanted a certain thing, and I had some concerns about it, and we ended up getting where they wanted to be. And the guy afterwards says, "I really appreciate that you're for it. Let me tell you, we're going to endorse you, and we're going to be there for you." And that wasn't the consideration, but it was like, okay, well, I appreciate you'll have my back after the fact. And so then they led the way to take my Democratic Party endorsement away from me in my last election. And I thought, wait a minute, you told me. Things change, Jeff. Yeah. Things change.
Gotcha.
So, it's a part of it I would offer. I think it's terrible now. That'd be a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, right. That's right. We can get into that in the Q&A maybe. So talk about you're at the Bengals, and I'm sure tons of learning there because you were there for
19 years.
19 years, almost two decades. So
It means I'm old.
what's that? Yeah. So talk about what were some of the biggest challenges there with not only just your daily life and the daily job, but also just being in that organization.
Sure.
Talk about some of those challenges.
So the NFL economics are so extraordinary.
Sure.
That is all the other teams in the league. So Dallas and New York and Philadelphia, Washington D.C. is they're successful and they push up league revenues. That pushes up costs in all the other teams because the players get half of the revenue, which means that as all these other teams are pushing up the amount of revenue, you take half the revenue, divide it by 32 teams, and that's how much the Bengals have to spend on players.
Gotcha.
And so obviously if you're in a smaller market, Cincinnati and Jacksonville would be the two smallest markets. So the challenge is we're in a smaller, more conservative market. And so you have to sell suites and you have to sell club seats and you have to sell tickets, big numbers at big prices, but really not prices that can be sustained here in a smaller market. And so it puts a lot of pressure to try to keep up with the Joneses, not just Jerry Jones, but all the Joneses. And you're really in a market that makes it pretty tough. Mm-hmm. So I oversaw all of our sales in some of our public affairs and non-football PR, and it was a great job. The Brown family are wonderful people. Marvin Lewis is extraordinary, still an advisor to me, and it's great that I can pick up the phone and call Marvin or text Marvin and ask him some stuff. A lot of what we do in soccer, as you would imagine, is pretty translatable to the NFL or to other sports. But it was an awesome job. At the end of the day, the biggest challenge was I was bored. And not that I didn't put a full day's work in, but all of us like jobs that challenge us.
Sure.
And after 19 years, I was looking for something a little bit more, which is why, frankly, I wanted to be on city council, and the Bengals were extraordinarily generous. They kept me as a full-time executive at the Bengals while allowing me to be a Cincinnati city council member, which meant that, a lot of my time I'm running up to city council for hearings and votes and things of that nature. Not too many businesses allow their employees to do that. So they were generous. When I left city council, I was invited to be on the board of my kids' youth soccer club, and that sort of became the pivot point to soccer.
That's my next question is, take us through that thought process. I mean, before you even got to the journey part, when was that seed planted? What did that look like? What were the other ideas that you were thinking through that weren't FC Cincinnati?
Well, so when I joined the board of my kids' youth soccer club, I'm sort of an all-in kind of guy. So I started reading all this stuff from U.S. Soccer about if we're ever going to keep up with catch up to the rest of the world, we really need to do these things in our youth area. And one of it was we had too many clubs, not enough good coaches, not enough players playing together. And so I ended up led the merger with Kings. The club I was with was Hammer. And so they became Kings Hammer Academy, and I became president of the board. And they have, I think, 1,500, 2,000 players, several $1 million budget. So it became and I'm a volunteer. So it just, but you want to lead and you want it to be successful. And so now I'm traveling with my son all over the United States because he's on a pretty good team. So we're going to Vegas, and we're going to Florida, and we're going to Carolinas, and you're seeing these multi-million-dollar facilities with dozens of field and thousands of players and their parents. And we're playing in Elizabethtown, which is south of Lexington, about 50 miles, and we're staying at a hotel in Louisville because that's the closest hotel. So you could start to see that soccer was becoming this big thing. So at the NFL, we get a deck every year from the league that says how the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla. And so we would give it to the local TV stations and Procter & Gamble and some of the big companies to support our sponsorship deals and TV deals. And so in it, there's a couple slides. And one of the slides is Nielsen ratings for Americans 18 to 49. What sports are they watching? And it's the NFL by a lot, and then college football, and right behind college football is professional soccer, and then a big drop to NBA, NHL, college basketball, MLB, baseball. Wow. When you take out Americans 50 and older, the interest in baseball statistically is rather small. And so then I went back and looked in 2004, what was this data like? So over 10 years, what had happened? Literally in 2004, soccer wasn't even on that pyramid. And then in 2005, it comes on, and then by 2010, this dramatic push up the pyramid. And then I looked locally to see, well, what are the ratings for soccer in this community? Is it any different than what we're seeing nationally? And it wasn't. So I'm seeing this thing with my son traveling all over the country. I'm seeing the NFL data. I'm looking locally. And so it occurred to me, if we're a major league community, then Cincinnati needs to have a professional soccer team. And so then I started doing the research because it had been tried a few other times. So what would we need to do to make it work here that hadn't been done before? And obviously every startup, that begins with ownership. Do you have the investors willing to invest capital, to be patient with it while you grow it? And that hadn't happened before. Do you have the requisite management? People who love soccer are needed, but people who know the business of sports are needed more. Is there a place to play? If you're playing at a high school stadium, it's sort of hard to call yourself a pro team. And you're not going to have any money to support a pro team because high school stadiums don't have suites and club seats and advertising and everything. And then the last is there a league that it's not going to be the Bundesliga or the EPL, but is it a sufficient heights, quality that when people watch, they go, yeah, we got a professional soccer team because they play good professional soccer. And so I felt like if you could get those four things, then the last piece was, could we build a relevant sports brand in the market? And I defined relevant as a winning brand, a family-friendly brand, and a visible brand. And so really I set about building those four things and writing a business plan to do the fifth.
Gotcha. So that's fascinating. It's because it is very much like the way you would approach a startup, and where you have this little idea and you go shop this around and talk to as many people as possible, and try to look at things from different angles. Love to know who are some of those people that you talked to initially to get buy-in, as well as counsel. And
this shows the importance of making friends. So let me start with that as part of the startup introduction. So a couple years ago, I had met a guy, Mike Mosel, who played at Xavier and was from the Netherlands. And he was looking to start a professional soccer team in Cincinnati. And my son had a Dutch trainer. And so Jack Herman's, I'm on city council, I work for the Bengals, and he says, I want you to meet my friend Mike. And so the short of it is they go up to Dayton. And then a couple years later, it's not working in Dayton, and he calls me and says, we want to transfer the team to Cincinnati. Would you be interested in helping me make that happen? So because I was thinking, we need a team in Cincinnati, I said, sure. So the first guy I called was George Joseph Automotive. I've known the Joseph since high school. Literally, like 4 generations of Berdings have bought all our cars to the Josephs.
Gotcha.
They played in an adult league. George still plays.
Wow.
And so I called George and said, this is what I'm trying to do. Would you be interested in being an investor in it? He says, how much? I said, I don't know, 50 grand. And he says, okay. So Mike Mosel set up this meeting with the United Soccer League about transferring the license to Cincinnati. So I take George with me, and it's just the two of us, and we're on the brand new at the time rooftop bar at Residence Inn down by the Taft Museum. And so we're up there, and we talk to him. I share him my background, George's background. And so on the basis of that, they give us a conditional license for 18 months. That the Cincinnati Group, as it was called, had 18 months to figure out the ownership, put together a management team, and a place to play. And so for no money down, but it was going to cost $1 million if we could pull it together. So the first thing I started was the place to play, because are you going to invest $1 million on a pro team that has no place to play? Probably not. So I obviously went to the Bengals first, because Paul Brown Stadium, you can play soccer at Paul Brown Stadium. And the Bengals, are pretty focused and pretty happy with football. So they passed. So then I went to Bob American football, yeah. So then I went to Bob Castellini. New York City FC was playing at Yankee Stadium. And so it's plausible. It's not ideal, but it's plausible as a start point. And Bob was significantly interested. He's seen the data. And so being able to combine as an owner, baseball and soccer was appealing, but it was the year the Reds were looking to host the All-Star game. So the timing was terrible. So they passed. And so then it just so happened that Paul Brown Stadium that fall had hosted UC football while they were finishing the renovations up at Nippert. So I knew the athletic director. So I called the athletic director, asked for a meeting, went up there with George Joseph and told him what we were trying to do. And he said, yeah, I'm interested. And so he went to President Ono, who also was interested. And ultimately they took it to the Board of Trustees and then to brief them on this. This is after multiple meetings. And I got a call one day. Jeff, this is a woman in Carl Lindner III's office. Would you take a call from Carl Lindner? I said, sure. So the next thing, and Carl gets on the phone and says, I understand you're the guy putting together the soccer franchise. And I said, I am. And he says, and you're looking to play at UC? I said, yes. And he says, do you have your majority owner yet? And by that time I had, in addition to George Joseph, Jack Wyant, Blue Chip Capital, who invests in startups. Steve Hightower from Hightower Petroleum, the largest minority business owner, private here in Greater Cincinnati, from up in Middletown. And so I had the three of them, but I didn't have. And I said to him, he says, well, do you have your majority owner? And I said, I don't, because I don't have a place to play. And I'm not going to call the owner until I have a place to play. And he goes, well, I'm on the board at UC. And there's a lot of enthusiasm about what you want to do. And I have had a long time interest in professional soccer. And I've been talking to some of the MLS owners about professional soccer, but my only interest is in Cincinnati. We bring all our businesses to Cincinnati, and I want to know if you'd like to join efforts to do this. And so I said, I'd like to talk about that. He said, can you come over and have lunch with me? I said, sure. He goes, how about today? And so I went and had lunch with him and literally came back and told the Bengals, remember that soccer thing about 4 or 5 months ago that we were kicking around? There wasn't a whole lot of interest here. I said, well, Carl Lindner had me over for lunch today, and he's pretty interested, and it seems like this thing might work up at UC. And so that was sort of the start of the marriage between me and Carl Lindner.
That's great. That's awesome. So before we get too far into the FC Cincinnati, more from maybe Bengals and FC Cincinnati, I always like to hear who people have gone to from mentorship and for counsel. Who are some of the people that have helped you along the way and that you've turned to?
John Williams, who was just this year a great living Cincinnati and has been a longtime mentor of mine. He's the one that came to me and asked me to run the stadium campaign. And you know, I didn't, as you noted, I didn't have a whole lot of business experience. So when I took the job at the Bengals, you know, I'm going to be responsible for sales. I had literally just had like 1 semester of MBA, and he said, "Don't worry, we won't let you fail." And so John Williams and a guy, Jack Brown, who used to be the head of the Nielsen Company, which was over in Northern Kentucky, the two of them, a guy named Mike Burke, who was the managing partner at KMK, passed away tragically a while back now with cancer, were guys in the business community that really sort of took me under. Politically, David Mann certainly has been a longtime friend. Bill Butler from Corporex, I mentioned that I work construction to pay my way through college. Bill Butler hired me. My mom was his construction administrator, and so Bill Butler made sure every Christmas break, spring break, and summer I had a job as a laborer, and has been a longtime friend and advisor.
That's great.
Certainly, I'll say, if you could tell from my initial part of this talk, I mean, I grew up in a lower middle class family. I never would have dreamed anything to the extent that I'm involved now. And I give credit to teachers, coaches, and mentors. And I encourage everyone to pay it forward. Build relationships where you give yourself an opportunity, people to take an interest in you, believe in you, support you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know what you don't know. And then when you get in a position, make sure you pay it forward and find other people. This is Cody Parsons on our staff. He does a phenomenal job. And as Cody knows, Cody does great work for me, and I try to give him opportunities like people gave me, because he's going to be tremendous someday.
Gotcha.
Pretty tremendous now.
I was going to say, can't wait for that, right, Cody? So, talk about guys like Cody on your team. Talk about people and finding the right talent. You mentioned something before about how people saw something in you that was kind of a competitiveness that wasn't about the skill set; it was more about the mindset. Talk about that and building the organization, the FC Cincinnati organization.
Yeah, when I got hired by the Bengals, I had no sales experience. I didn't have sports experience. So really it was more, character, leadership, communications, and can you transfer those skills into sales? So it's not like I had sold tickets for a minor league team and then sold tickets for a major league team and then managed and then became the exec. So I'm a big believer, develop skill sets. And then you can always find something that hopefully matches your passion and your skills. And if you find it doesn't work, don't be afraid to move on to something else. So with FC Cincinnati, we have a great leadership team. I will say, the day we launched, August the 12th of 2015, there were 11 people in a picture that was the initial staff of FC Cincinnati, me and 10 others. Right now, there's 3 people left. 8 are no longer with us. So Jeff Smith, who's the VP of Sales, and Dan McNally, who's the VP of Operations. And my message there is, don't be afraid to admit you hired someone who wasn't a great fit. And you thought that they would be, you projected them in a way, and then it just didn't work out. And if you've coached them, if you've supported them, if you've given them the necessary feedback throughout the tenure, and at some point you come to the recognition that the organizational goals cannot be met. Each of us has our part, and then collectively we're a team pushing the team up. And if someone is not able, just through no fault, maybe just the skill sets aren't there, the fit's not there, then my belief is be professional, be supportive, do everything you can to help them find someplace else. But at the end of the day, it's not fair to them to put them in a role where they're destined to fail. And at a certain point, everyone just should acknowledge that.
Gotcha. Well, tapping into the parallel with many startups, that initial team for the first few years changes a good bit. I've launched a company that rolled off the team. It happens because there's so much change going on, on a monthly, quarterly basis. Was some of that because of that, just in terms of timing, where you need some kind of skill set, year one or even before the company launches versus that? Or?
Well, our goals were, if we could get 10,000 fans a game, we would be successful. But all of a sudden, we're selling 17,000 tickets.
Yeah.
And here's a good example. Merchandise. This is actually a really good example. Merchandise. We told the league we thought we would sell 600,000 of merchandise. That we had a pro forma, we had a review with them, and they said, "You're crazy. No team. You'll never sell 600,000 of merchandise." And I said, "No, because I had a Procter & Gamble guy who helped me create this. We had done consumer behavior theory on colors. Consumers have intuitive feelings about colors. Orange is a warm color. Yellow and red are hot colors, but orange, the combination of the two is a warm color. Has a good energy associated with it. Very few people have orange as their favorite color, but most people will be warm to orange, blue. You look at Clemson, you look at Syracuse. We looked at all these sports teams. Denver, orange, blue combinations right at the top. So anyway, the short of it is we had a consultant managing the merchandise for us. And our merchandise sales were so extraordinarily successful, they were quickly in over their head. And so I had to hire someone, and here's just a little Cincinnati story. So George Joseph comes to me and says, "Our merchandise is doing really well, isn't it?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he says, "But we're having some troubles, long lines at the games, some other things." And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Would you be are we looking for some help?" And I said, "Yes." And he says, "Well, I know this guy whose daughter is marrying someone who's been the manager for Ralph Lauren in Shanghai, managing retail operations in China." And he's moving to Cincinnati looking for a job. Literally. He was 10 years at Ralph Lauren. And so I'm like, how soon does he get here? And so I met with Amir Shimoni and hired him. Yeah. But that would be an example of the person who was doing it previously. I thought based on what demand might be at 600,000 could manage. In our first year, we did 1.5 million in merchandise. And the value of that is far beyond the money, of course, the profit everyone wearing FC Cincinnati, thank you so much.
Right.
They're building our brand. When you're wearing the merchandise, it's telling people it's okay to support this team. It's raising awareness of the team. It's helping us be a visible sports brand. And so the more merchandise we're selling, yes, the profit part is good, but it elevates the brand from a visibility and credibility standpoint throughout the market.
Sure.
So yes, when we initially launched, we had people thinking we were going to be this, and we quickly in our first year became this. And I had people at this level who were probably okay at that level, but certainly were not okay at that level.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That's great analogy, great example. So talk about that a little bit. So we talked about before, even though you're in year 2, a lot changes, I'm sure. Year 1, year 2, a lot changes even throughout that year 1. What are some of the things that you looked to do and are doing differently, whether it's team, like the organization team, as well as the actual team?
Sure.
Marketing, branding, from a business standpoint, year 1 versus year 2, what has changed you specifically for your role?
Well, the biggest change is now managing 2 parallel efforts. One is a USL franchise to try to win our league and be successful, simultaneously managing an MLS expansion bid. Mm-hmm. Obviously, last year I had my hands full just building an initial franchise, but now we're literally building an MLS franchise while we run this one, and this one's only in year 2. Mm-hmm. So that obviously is extraordinarily challenging, but also very fun. Mm-hmm. Speaking specifically to the USL franchise, a couple things. Last year we made a decision to put all our games on TV. People ask, what was the hardest decision you made in year 1? It was to put our games on TV. Because we weren't going to get a rights fee. Like the Reds and Bengals get a rights fee to put the games on TV. We paid to put our games on TV. We bought the airtime. We paid for the satellite truck. We rented the HD cameras. I paid the producer in the truck who produces the Bengals preseason games. I hired the talent. And then I had to sell the commercials. And so the cost of all of the expense, if we sold all the commercials at what we thought we could sell, we were still going to lose $150,000. And if we didn't sell all the commercials, we might lose $250,000. But I was convinced we needed to put our games on TV. Mm-hmm. Why? Well, think of the brands that matter in sports in this market, right? UC, basketball, football, Xavier basketball, Reds, Bengals. What do they have in common? They're all on TV, right? Yeah. Think of the brands that don't really get a whole lot of attention in this market, right? NKU basketball, that's Division I. Florence Freedom, the Cyclones. What do they have in common? None of them are on TV. And so if we wanted to be Cincinnati's professional soccer team, not Cincinnati's minor league soccer team, Cincinnati's professional soccer team, I was convinced we had to be on TV. So I went to Carl and said, going back to that number 1 thing, ownership, right? Patient capital. I want to do this. But I think if we do it, yes, we'll lose money on TV, but we'll make it up in ticket sales, because I was convinced our marketing plan was really pretty good. And
obviously it was.
And so I thought, as we tipped, to talk about Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point, as we tipped, the people, as you're hearing it around the water cooler and friends and whatnot, what'd you do this weekend? The next step might not be to buy a ticket. The next step might be to turn us on TV. And if you saw good quality soccer, you saw people having fun, you saw an HD broadcast that looked professional, you would go, okay, yeah, that looks pretty good. I told our producer, and there's a break in the action, show people in the stadium having fun. Our ticket prices are low. That was part of our family-friendly brand. And so we did it. Now, we did lose plenty of money on the TV, but then we sold 17,000 tickets a game, not 10,000 tickets a game, so we made up. This year, we've put all of our away games on TV, which is even a bigger challenge because some of our markets aren't nearly as successful as us, and some of the production quality is not as good as ours. You might see a stadium with 500 people in it, but at the end of the day, if you want to see your team, like when UC plays, East Carolina, and it's a dingy place, but at least I can see my team, and I felt it was important in terms of our next step to do that. Obviously, I made the change on the coach, and so that's a big change, and that's a big boy step. Right.
I'm sure that was not one on a whim. I'm sure.
No. I would just say this: last year. Externally, everything really went well. The team, every break you could get, we got. We were really pretty healthy as a team. We didn't have a whole lot of what I'd call external adversity. But internally, there was plenty of adversity, but it's our adversity. And so the fans don't need to know about the adversity because you don't want to worry about that. You just want to know, are you having fun at the games? Is the team involved in the community? Is the team a winning brand? Mm-hmm. And all that other stuff is what we have to worry about, not you. So as we look to year 2, though, again, because this year our league is no longer the 3rd division. It's now the 2nd division. So MLS is the 1st division. So all of a sudden, the quality of the play, the quality of the players, the budgets that are being invested, mm-hmm. The coaches that we're going up against are all at a higher level. And so we felt, given our aspirations to the MLS, now we're a 2nd division team, there were things that we had to address. We tried to address it while not making a change, but ultimately we made the decision that we had to make the change.
Gotcha. No, I'm sure that's a tough one. So talk about a little bit about. I'd love to hear about. We talk about community building and some of the communication that we shared here, and we talked a little bit about in the interview. But a startup is all about trying to build that community mm-hmm. initially and get that buzz going. Sometimes even before there's anything to sell, and just so you have this, you're not selling. It's right. You're just inviting people in to participate in the community. Talk about some of the things that you guys did to get the buzz going, get the excitement going, to build that engaged community.
Sure. There were probably 3 elements of it. The first was, obviously, there was a strong soccer community already in place, just mm-hmm. without a pro team right. sort of at the top. So if you go to a lot of bars, whether it be Rhinehouse or Molly Malone's over in Covington, there's bars where people on weekends will go, or on weeknights, go to watch professional soccer, whether it be the EPL or Bundesliga mm-hmm. or MLS or the U.S. men or women. That's the soccer bar. And so we went to those bars a little bit in advance, quietly, and then literally the night of the launch, August 12th, and then the 13th, and then the 14th, and then the 15th, and Carl Lindner went, and our staff went, and literally just invited soccer supporters to literally help us build this club and to give ownership in the club. And that is the origin of soccer that makes us very different than other sports. When you go to England, in Manchester or in Liverpool, you have the pub, you might have the right. shipyard or the mine or the mill, and people work, and people might have a drink, and there's the soccer field, and we might play, and it's our community, our club, mm-hmm. against the clubs in the other mm-hmm. communities. And so there is ownership in the club that is very organic. And I'll offer, no surprise to folks, when you're at an NFL game, there's nothing that happens from the PA announcer's reads to what's on the video boards. It's all very scripted. Mm-hmm. So think sure. about it. It's all to get a response from you. So the announcer says, "It's 3rd down," right? Or at the Reds game, you might see on the video board where the fans literally are clapping, right? They're trying to evoke a response. And in soccer, so when we went to these supporters, we said, you get to own the supporter section. As long as you keep it family friendly. The USL has some rules, so the smoke cannot be with a flammable, it has to be an aerosol. So as long as you follow some general rules, you guys create that. That is your space. And you start your own groups, whether you Dienerstadt or the Pride or whatnot. It's completely organic. We have a supporters group meeting where they come in. I tell them what's going on with the club.
Oh, that's
we
great.
have a fan advisory council. I ask them who should we play in our international friendly. Mm-hmm. And the goal is that they truly feel like we have some ownership in the club.
Yeah, sure.
And so it is their club. It's not my club. It's not here's the team and here's the fans. It's here's our club. And so we went to the youth soccer community. I had a little bit of an advantage because I was a president of a youth club. So I knew the presidents of all the youth clubs. And so we were going to them sort of quietly. I can't give you all the details. I can't tell you the name. I can't tell you who's going to own the team. I can't tell you who the coach is going to be. I can't tell you we're going to play. But I'm telling you there's going to be a professional soccer team. And so we want to do something where the youth clubs feel ownership. So as the president of the youth club, the biggest challenge is financial. So you may have a child that plays, and then all of a sudden, maybe there's a health emergency, or someone loses their job, and all of a sudden you can't pay the fees. Well, in that time of crisis, the last thing you want to do is take away a kid's passion, their team. That's who they're going to rely on to get through this moment. So you have to have scholarships. And so we said, well, this was an idea we had, called our Give Back Fund. So if the youth club is buying tickets, the families are buying tickets to come to our games. Last year we gave 20% of the money back to the club. Drop down menu, put your youth club. At the end of the year, here's a couple $1,000, here's a couple $1,000, here's a couple. Got so popular, the United Way was like, can we do a give back? And other not-for-profits were doing give backs. But that was how we sort of really got the youth community engaged. We didn't do any clinics. A lot of the youth clubs or the pro clubs do clinics.
Gotcha.
But the youth clubs do clinics because that's how they raise extra money to help pay for fees for people who can't afford it. So I said, we're not going to do any clinics because I don't want to take money out of your pocket.
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to take money. Well, let's be honest. If I have pro players doing a clinic and you have some coaches doing a clinic, parents are going to want to come to my clinic, and that's not going to help you. So we didn't do any of that. So we tried to make the point that we're going to build this as a way that we can be a part of a rising tide to lift the community up, whether it be in the youth soccer community or otherwise.
That's great. That's great. A couple more questions, then I'll turn it over to you guys for Q&A. And actually, I just realized I don't have Twitter on my phone, so can you guys pull that up and help me out with that? I usually do, but I've just got a new phone, so I haven't had a chance to load that on. Excuses. But would love to hear a little bit more about, you teased a little bit about somebody that you're reaching out to that potentially play against. Can you talk a little bit about that, or share
Sure.
As much as you can?
Yeah. So obviously the international friendly last year against Crystal Palace did bring us international recognition. FIFA, the world governing body, has a TV show like E60, and they did a segment at Crystal Palace on FC Cincinnati that was broadcast all over the world. So soccer is a great way. It is the world sport. There's more people playing soccer on this planet than every other sport combined. So to be able to bring the world to Cincinnati through an international team is obviously a great opportunity for us to build our brand, but also a great way to sort of celebrate Cincinnati internationally. So last year, the Crystal Palace, who were just tremendous, really sort of, I don't want to say fell into our lap, but we got really lucky because there's not, think about it. If you're in the preseason getting ready for the EPL season and you have a chance to just go to like Ireland or Scotland or the Netherlands, close, versus fly all the way across the ocean to play a couple teams in North America, the coach probably just wants to stay, over there. And so it just so happened that Crystal Palace was coming over. They needed a third team. We had an open Saturday, so they played an MLS team on a Wednesday, and then we came and were the Saturday. So this year it's been harder because literally there aren't really many EPL teams coming over, so we've had to expand the net a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so I will share with you, we're talking to teams in other parts of Europe and other parts of Central and South America. While there's a chance that we get a team from England, if I were betting, I would say we'd probably get a pretty top-named team from another part of the world.
Gotcha. That's exciting.
And the goal would be, hopefully, we get this done here in the next week. It was May the 14th when we announced Crystal Palace.
Gotcha.
So it's about at the time to get this done.
That's exciting. Very cool. So another thing I want to ask you about, first and foremost, what's the scouting report for Cleveland?
They're Cleveland.
Okay.
Well, obviously, they've already won one game. So the Open Cup starts tomorrow. The Open Cup is the oldest team tournament of any sport in the United States. So it's the oldest soccer tournament in the United States, but actually the Open tournament.
Gotcha.
So think of it as, if I were you to baseball analogy, the rookie league plays each other, and the winners play single A baseball, and the winner of that plays double A baseball, and the winner of that plays triple A, and then you get the major league teams in. So for our league, we're in round 2, and if we win, round 3 would be at home, probably against Louisville City, and then round 4 would be when the MLS teams would come in. Ultimately, the winner of the tournament wins $250,000 and gets to play internationally against the winners of the other cups from other parts of the world. So it's a very exciting. You think of March Madness. Everyone loves when David goes up against Goliath, and win. So Cleveland, a very good team. They're more akin to, like I said, a single A baseball kind of thing.
Right.
But the big thing for us is GB gets to play. We're really happy to see GB play.
Gotcha.
So he's been suspended for a few games.
That is going to be a good one. So we talked about this a little bit before, but talk about the parallel between startups and FC Cincinnati and what you've done, as well as what you're doing to actively support startups.
Well, it's interesting. I spoke here about a year ago on the other side, and I never thought of us as a startup. I really never did. I sort of wrote the business plan in my free time while I was at the Bengals. I literally wrote our marketing plan based on the book. I'll put another plug in, The Tipping Point. So I had read it, and then when I was writing the marketing plan, I reread it and was like highlighting everything. Yeah. So anyway, and because of my experience in sports, I just viewed it as I'm starting a sports franchise. I didn't really think I'm starting a startup. I just never thought of it that way until I was here. And so, but obviously, I am a big believer just civically that the reason we've been so successful is because our timing was perfect. This is a rising city. This is a city with a lot of wonderful things going on, and we're riding that wave. I think we are pushing a little bit higher in the process, but we're riding the wave, and we're riding the wave of the energy that's in this hall and in the entrepreneurs and in the brilliant people that are coming to Cincinnati to start businesses, as well as maybe go work for some of our top companies, but then maybe they'll have an entrepreneurial bug to come here into the hall. So we've had several partners in the startup community. Listener, a tremendous startup, helped develop our app. We have Red Hawk that is working with us on putting, like, you can take photos at our games, and then we'll put them up on the video board. FanFlow, Chris Crocker, a friend of mine from the Bengals, just started this. We're his pilot, where it connects fans to the players without the middlemen. So if you want autographed merchandise, you don't have to go onto some site that's hawking merchandise. We would always go into a hotel when we arrive at a city, and you'd see all these kids asking for autographs. Then you'd look behind the kids, and there's all these boxes. And behind the boxes, there's some guy that got all the kids to, get the autographs to sell it. And so FanFlow connects the players directly to fans. So if you want an autographed Austin Berry jersey, you could just go directly to Austin. You don't have to come through me, the team. So that's Chris Crocker. So we've tried, to be fair, we've been pitched by a lot of startups. Sure. But we're still a startup, and there's a lot of staff that has to go into managing all this, and sometimes it's like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. Sure. We've got all this great energy coming into us, and it's really sort of hard to sort of navigate what are the prime opportunities here, what are the opportunities we can manage now, what are great ideas and great opportunities, we just can't manage them now, and we have to set that aside maybe for year 3 or beyond. Sure,
gotcha. Well, I'm going to turn it over to you guys for a little bit. I know you guys probably have a lot of questions that are probably better than mine and more insightful than mine, but who's got questions for Jeff? Striped shirt, yeah.
How do you keep track of all the social media activity? Do you use any special? There's a lot going on Reddit, Facebook groups, etc. How do you gather intelligence?
I think you run all those personally, right? Jeff runs all those handles personally. No, I'm just kidding.
So we have a guy on our staff, DJ Schweitzer, who does our social media and website. He's our director of communications. And he was working for a higher education publishing company, technology company, and then on his own time was writing a soccer blog. He's sort of right at the high end of millennial. I think he's 35. And so anyway, after he was covering us for a couple months, and we all of a sudden were at the point where it's time to bring communications in-house, we brought DJ on. He likes to say I saved his marriage, because literally he would work all day, come home, have dinner with the wife, kids, and then go into his office to do his soccer blog. So I'm like, now you can just do your soccer all day.
That's great.
But DJ does a great job. I just turned 50 this year, so when I was on city council, Twitter was just starting, Facebook was just starting, so I do a little bit of that. But my kids tell me, Dad, that's not cool. So DJ is on where my kids every now and then say, Dad, DJ is missing it. But for the most part, DJ does a pretty good job. And, with 3 teenagers, I get plenty of feedback there. So last week we had Alan Koch did Q&A with fans on Reddit.
Oh, great.
Which was pretty cool. So.
Great, that was great.
Very cool.
So we're always looking to do more of it. And then as new technology and new opportunities come on board, you try to, because we are a startup in soccer, we're not the established NFL, NBA, MLB. We can be a pilot. We can test some things that the more established leagues would feel a little bit less comfortable embracing. And if we miss a little bit, we miss a little bit, and that's okay too. But I'd rather be bold that way and really try some things and see what takes. So as I mentioned, we had the minority owners built in before we found the place to play. And I remember Jack Wyant hosting sessions in his office with the big whiteboard because he invests in startups and sort of walking us through all the pieces that he felt we needed to do. And, all that was fine, and it sort of got us, moving a little bit forward, and, some provocative questions from investors can, sort of force you to do that stuff. But once we got the place to play, and then we had an opportunity to be legitimate. To be fair, all that other work, none of it was going to matter if we didn't have a place to play. But once we had a place to play, and then Carl Lindner called me, and all of a sudden we had a place to play, we had the owner, now we had a management group, because I wasn't going to leave the Bengals. I mean, I had 3 teenage kids. I wasn't just going to leave the Bengals on a whim. And so, you had to have the ownership willing to make it work. And so that's when all of a sudden we had, because then once we had Carl Lindner and we started going, you're right, then other people are calling us going, can I be an owner? Can I be an owner? I'd like to invest in you. And then I had to aggravate some folks, because initially I might have said, would you have an interest? Oh, I'm not sure. And then I had Carl Lindner, and now they're going, I'm interested. I'm like, I don't need you now, sorry.
Right.
There's no room for you.
Right.
And so obviously the timing of that becomes a challenge. We tried to focus on influencers. And so look at different segments within the community and who would be those initial influencers to be able to take it and then build it from there and then build it from there. And so whether it was the leaders of, the people in the pubs, the leaders of the youth soccer community, our investors and leaders in the business community, political leaders, the mayor, and others, we tried to pick who would be the key influencers that really would help us. And then just hope we timed it.
Gotcha. Other questions? Yes.
You mentioned when you were working on kind of like the marketing plan and business plan that you read on Capital's Tipping Point. Are there any other books or resources kind of in those early stages that you can point back to and referenced?
There's a book, I think it's John Gordon, The Energy Bus. We spend so much time at work. You don't want to work with energy vampires. People that just suck the energy out of your organization. That was a book that Marvin Lewis had introduced me to. But from a marketing standpoint, I've read all of Gladwell's books, so I'm a big supporter of his thoughts. But for me, the tipping point was literally right on the mark of what we were trying to do, and the phenomenon of could we become a cultural phenomenon? And if we became a cultural phenomenon, I thought we would have the opportunity to really knock this out of the park. I was convinced that there was an appetite to do this, but we had to do it the right way. There's a Supreme Court opinion on pornography where the Supreme Court famously said we can't define it, but we know it when we see it.
Right.
And I feel the same thing applies to professional sports teams. You don't really know exactly what's the payroll, what are the marketing promotions, do they give out bobbleheads? There's no real clear definition, but we're in a sophisticated major league community. And people maybe who aren't from here, but maybe they came from Pittsburgh or New York or Chicago or Denver, they have professional sports as a part of their youth, as a part of their growing up. And so they know it when they see it. And so the key to us was, could we build with the support of ownership, the capital of ownership, could we build a professional sports team that passed the credibility, the eyeball test, Yeah. And so I said, we never aimed to be Cincinnati's minor league soccer franchise. We were Cincinnati's professional soccer franchise who happened to be playing in a lower division to start, with an understanding that our aspirations were always to get to the top. And the tipping point just spoke to me, for me, the nexus of sports, business, and civic. That it brought it all together, and the timing was just perfect.
Gotcha. We'll take one more question, then we'll go to Twitter. Yes, white shirt.
I am a big believer. So I graduated from college. I graduated from high school in '85, and I didn't go to MBA until '95. So I had a long history of working, 10 years, before I then started a master's. And so personally, I'm a big believer in getting some work experience before going to a master's, because at least for me, it made all the education much more relevant. If I had gone from political science undergrad to MBA, I think everything would have been completely foreign, and frankly, I probably would have struggled. But by going at night while I was working full time, and having people in my classes that were Procter & Gamble and GE, they were full time at those companies. It made everything much clearer to me, and I think that that's invaluable. Everyone has a different path, but since you asked the question, that certainly was the path that worked for me. The MLS is our next big business challenge. Again, this is a major league sports town, and the MLS is the major league level of soccer in this country. And so if we're going to get there, we have to have the right ownership group. We have to prove that this market can support soccer. We have the right ownership group. We've proven better than any other market that this market will support pro soccer. The strength of the market is not a real asset, only because if you look at Nielsen markets, we are the smallest of the 12 cities applying for MLS expansion. And when you think of TV deals, size of markets is something that's a key factor. And then the last one is the soccer-specific stadium. Why is that important? We have a great thing going up at Nippert, and we want to be there as long as we can. But here's the thing. In Major League Soccer, this isn't the NFL where the TV deals are so extraordinary, or the NBA extraordinary TV deals. MLS is more in the adolescence. And so you have 22 teams in the MLS, 16 of them have their own stadium. And next year there'll be 19 out of 23 when LAFC comes on. They all have their own stadium. And none of the teams would be characterized as being enormously profitable. Frankly, many of them not really profitable at all, because they're investing in the league. They're signing designated players, bringing some of the top players from the world to the U.S. to grow the sport. And MLS is broadcast live in 170 countries around the world. Part of that's because of international players from those countries playing here. And so if 19 of the teams have their own stadium and still aren't economically really hitting it, then how would we, in a partnership at UC, where UC gets the parking revenues, we share the concessions, there's no naming rights, there's no opportunity really to do additional events where the money would go to the team because they own the stadium. All those other teams have all those things and still work to break even every year. And so if you say Cincinnati's the smallest market, and we're going to be one of only 4 or 5 teams that don't have their own stadium, and by the way, the ones that don't are in the biggest markets in our country, then how would Cincinnati ever really make it work? And so we're competing. So people ask, do you have to have your own stadium? And I say, no, we don't. We also don't have to win the competition. And so if we're going to win the competition, we believe we're going to have to build our own stadium. So what does that involve? Okay, well, we're going to invest $250 million privately to bring the MLS to Cincinnati. $250 million, that's a lot of money. And so 150 of that goes to the MLS, and 100 of that's going to go towards a new stadium. Will that pay the entire cost of a stadium? No, it won't. I was on city council. I voted for lots of economic development deals, 20 million here, 30 million here, and that's just a part of business. And so will we look for some incentives? We will. Will anyone have their taxes raised? No. Will anyone see fees go up because of what we're looking for? No. Will anyone have to sacrifice, boy, I want a new arena, or I want a convention center expansion, or I want decks over Fort Washington Way, or you name the investments that we feel this community should make in order to continue to grow, continue to rise. Is what we're talking about, the amount of what we're talking about in any way going to shortchange an ability to accomplish those goals as a community? No, it won't. We're going to put in $250 million. That's, by comparison, what's been done in other stadiums in this community, and I was a part of those, so I'm not being critical, but that was at a different time, a different era, down the riverfront. It was to keep those two teams in Cincinnati. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about pretty modest help. That's not a new tax, not a new, and so we're going to look for a public-private partnership where well more than half of the money is going to be private. And we're going to soon be talking to the public to have that as a real conversation with pictures of a stadium. The stadium would be in the urban core. It could be very close to here, or it could be in another urban environment right here in our community. I would offer there's neighborhoods in our community that could stand $250 million in private investment, and use it as an opportunity to continue to grow. So that by far is the biggest challenge that we're trying to tackle.
It's a pretty big challenge.
So I'll offer, Cody's laughing here because he knows I'm really not the technology guy, but I understand Reddit's a way to have an active, ongoing conversation like we did last week with the coach. MLS teams track attendance on Reddit, so frequently we'll check out Reddit. Literally, we'll see, here's the MLS team attendance, and there's FC Cincinnati. So it's a great forum, certainly. How, some people may prefer Reddit, other people were getting questions tonight from Twitter.
Yeah.
So
at least one. That's right.
I rely on DJ for all this, so, we try to do our best.
Gotcha.
Honestly, when I fired the coach, that's a hard decision. That's not a decision that's made at all lightly. It wasn't an immediate decision. It wasn't a snap decision. It was a long process, but led to that conclusion. But there's people's lives involved, and so you don't feel good about that. Certainly, John was very popular with the fans and the media. And so there was a certain amount of surprise and disappointment, and sort of, I acknowledge all that. A lot of people didn't like my decision. There's probably a lot of people who still don't like the decision. And I understand that, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible to our owners and our fans, I think, to make the decisions that help the team achieve the goals. And Carl and I agreed that was a decision that needed to be made, but it was the first time, Carl said it's going to get hot for a little bit. It's going to get a little choppy. And, but think about it, the pro teams fire their coaches. The college teams fire their coaches. It's just a part of sports. And, I hope that fans understand. You talked about at the beginning about being honest and being a person of integrity. Carl Lindner, the Lindner family, we have values in our organization. Literally, you come off the elevator and there are values. And am I acting in accord with those values? And the answer is yes. Fans may not see it, and frankly, you don't need to see all the, dirty laundry, if you will. And I hope people trust me that I've built this franchise from an idea, and I have a lot of experience in professional sports. The first person I heard from when the news got out, Marvin Lewis.
Really?
Sent me a text, and it was awesome. So, you just have to do what you think is right, and be willing to live with the consequences. Well, let me say, I think we were pretty confident that we would get 10,000. I mean, we looked at other cities, what they were drawing, and I looked at the number of youth soccer players, and I looked at the ratings we had for pro soccer in this market, and some of the things we've talked about here. I didn't have any doubt that we were going to get 10,000. And so I guess that if it didn't stick, I think we would have been at 10,000, because we didn't think that we would stick it like we did. Like I mentioned, I didn't think we'd tip in year one. I thought we might tip in year two. So I think what would have happened is we would have been at 10,000 and we would have been modestly popular, and people would have had fun, and there'd be, chatter in terms of building towards tip. It just so happened that we did a lot of things really good and got, some of it is just divine providence, just good luck. And we certainly had our share of that as well. I will tell you, I was convinced, having been to some professional soccer games, but I'm Xavier basketball, NBA's from Xavier. Obviously, I'm a Red season ticket holder since the new stadium. Obviously, Bengals 19 years. I've been to lots of sporting events. And I was convinced that a professional soccer event would be unlike anything people in this market had ever seen, unless they'd gone to a professional. So that's why the creation of the Bailey and that culture with the chants and the songs, because I knew that would be infectious. People would literally be like, right. Whoa, they don't do that at the Bengals or the Reds, And so...
chant other things that they get.
Yeah, And I also felt like, literally, our timing of this is a rising city, this new generation. We were inviting you to say, this is your team. You get to create your own pro team. Think about it. In 1968, the Bengals came to town. They were playing at Nippert. No one had any idea what the NFL was going to become in 50 years, right? 40 years. No one had a clue. People would go to the Bengals game in suits and ties. Their Sunday best. They'd go to a Bengals game. But that was their generation's startup, right? Football, pro football, American football. And I always sort of thought, I worked at the Bengals because we had a couple thousand people who were originals, and the tickets may have passed through 3 generations, were the grandchildren. This was now their team. And I just thought, we have this rising tide in this city, and we're going to give them an opportunity to build their own team in a sport that they have a passion for. Because, the beauty of sports is its ability to unify, to motivate, to inspire. And so I'm a big believer, from some of the research I've done, that this generation doesn't want to just be a citizen of Cincinnati, Ohio, or the United States. They want to be a citizen of the world. Hey, this is our planet. This is our world. There's only one sport that brings people together on this whole planet, and that is soccer. It is soccer. And so if you want to have friends and you want to be a part of this global phenomenon of soccer, which is the number one sport in all these other countries, you have to have it here in Cincinnati. And we're giving you an invitation. Hey, make this your team. And I was convinced that it would be the connection point between the old Cincinnati and the legacy of the old Cincinnati, which has wonderful, tremendous assets that we've been gifted from prior generations, and something that we can call our own. And I was convinced of that.
Great question.
It's imperfect. It is very imperfect. Part of the challenge with a sports team is there's so many people coming out of colleges, sports administration, or they're in the industry, or they're not in the industry and they want to get into the industry. And so the minute you post something on Teamwork Online, you're going to have 1,000 resumes, people who want to be in the business. And everyone who I've ever, and I say this sort of embellishing, but all these folks I've met over the years, and they have children, or their neighbor's children, or the guy that's in the cubicle down, they all, hey, here's a resume. And they're brilliantly talented people. I don't have positions for all of them. I don't have the time to interview all of them. So Sarah Huber, who's our CFO, senior VP, she sort of helps manage the administration of the club and can try to collect all of that. We try to put them to a certain degree based on skill sets in buckets, and then as to the extent we have openings, we have directors or VPs, and that's their area. I'm a big believer, if I'm going to hold you accountable for results, I got to let you hire your staff. Because then if you don't get the job done, you can't blame it on your staff. If I forced you to hire someone, it's a real easy answer. They're awful, and you made me hire them. And so I'm a big believer that you have to have ownership of your staff. Obviously, we set the budget. I can say what in a conversation with you, what we think the experience level would ideally be. But at the end of the day, it's your hire. Now, I look to meet everyone before, so someone will bring me, hey, here's who I'm thinking, what do you think? Not as like, hey, you need to meet this person to get but maybe here's a finalist, Jeff. I'm going to bring him in or bring her in just to meet you and see if you have a good, vibe, a good interaction with them. Because again, back to the energy bus, we're going to spend a lot of time together. This isn't a 9-to-5 job. And so let's make sure that we feel like, we're all good parts of the team. Is that a perfect process? No. Obviously, you get recommendations as best you can. You try to get some sense of what they've done previously, how they've done. I personally, I like GPAs because I think it's a little bit of a distinguisher, pride in your work, time management skills, And I don't say that I need everyone to have a 4.0, but if I got 2 good candidates, I got one a 3.5 and one a 2.5, that 2.5 better really be special, because the 3.5 shows some of these other things that I think are indicative of quality. And at the end of the day, that's really what we want, is we want someone committed to quality. Again, there could be circumstances, I did terrible my junior year, my family was going through this, I had a 2.0. Okay, so.
That's a good question.
I'll just say, as a startup, it's an imperfect process, which is why I mentioned that of the 11 people in the picture, 8 of them aren't with us anymore, and that is 100% on me.
Guys, you hired, right?
I hired them. Yeah, no question. And so, did I hire everyone? I mentioned fit with some of it. Fit because we got bigger. Some of it was just there was not good fit. And you learn from it. I say, I'm a big believer in this. I make lots of mistakes, but I've been pretty successful at not repeating them. So learn from them, don't repeat. And I say that to my staff all the time. Don't worry about making mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes. But if you keep coming to me with the same mistake, we got a problem.
Good question. So I'm going to ask the last question. I'm going to do a yin to Bernard Yang. So what's been your best moment in the FC Cincinnati? Although it's still a short journey, so 2 years in. But,
it's easy.
It's probably a softball question.
It's really easy.
Love to hear you talk about it.
So you have to know me a little bit. Hopefully you've had a window into that tonight. But I'm not an enjoyable guy. I mean, I'm a work guy. And so I'm not impressed with myself, and I'm not impressed with what we do at all. And at the games, I don't have any fun until it's over and we won. And so I'm like churning the whole time. And I was the same way at the Bengals. Because I want to win. I want to win for our fans and for this community. So I don't enjoy it. And so I have to give you that to say what the greatest moment was.
Okay.
So my 15-year-old daughter, at the time she was still 14, we played Crystal Palace, and my daughter, so I mentioned my 3 teenage kids, I just have to say this out. So people said when I left the Bengals, all my kids knew was Dad works for the Bengals. And people would ask me, so what do your kids think? You're leaving the Bengals, you're going to start this new soccer team. And I said, well, of course, my oldest daughter wants to marry one of the players. And of course, my son wants to be one of the players. And my daughter, Grace, wants to run the team someday. And so Grace works for me with the club. She works in the team store. On game days, she's like my body person. So she holds my phone when people are texting me. Like, she answers the texts, and if someone needs me, Grace will interrupt me in a conversation. Dad, you need to call Jeff Smith. So anyway, to set that up is Grace is in the suite with me, and she's been working with me for, at that point, almost a full year, doing like little odds and ends kind of stuff. And so Crystal Palace, 35,000 people, EPL's come to Cincinnati. We brought the world to Cincinnati. And so the stadium is completely full, and the electricity in the stadium, hopefully some of you were there, it was just extraordinary. People got there early, and we had the walkout where we played Crystal Palace's song, and we let them wear their colors. I mean, it was awesome. And I'm in my suite sort of looking down, and Grace taps me on my shoulder and says, Dad, look what you did. That was the best.
That's awesome.
That was the best.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ben.